We've only got about another month before Star Wars Outlaws releases, so I wanted to finally talk about it a little bit more. Especially since it seems like some of the early footage that IGN is releasing isn't being received very well. I'm going to talk about the new gameplay, some criticisms of it, and my all-around impressions of the game based on what I've seen and what I think the studio is going for. I've seen the gameplay and I fully understand some of the reasons people are being critical of the footage, but if I'm being honest, some of you seem like you're trying to emulate one of these detailed comparison videos that you'd see on X or TikTok. Like, I get it, dog, you've watched a Croakcat video, give it a rest. It seems like the biggest focal point of a lot of the complaints are the appearance of the explosion effects, which, to be fair, do look very bad. I'm not really concerned about this though, and I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about it. Something like this is relatively easy to fix even this late in development, and it could be the case that it's already fixed. This gameplay could easily be an old build, and with the game already going gold well ahead of its release, there's plenty of time to polish little things like this in a day one patch. Much more concerning to me are what appear to be some substantial problems with the enemy AI just being completely oblivious to its surroundings. This enemy here, for example, goes from suspicious to passive in the space of time it takes for Kay to take cover and shoot this barrel next to him, which means that the explosion puts him back in his suspicious state, instead of alerting him to Kay's presence and putting him into combat, which it probably really should. Then there's weird stuff that I don't really know how to explain, like the damage radius on this barrel seeming to be different for enemies than it is for Kay. Because it sure looks to me like Kay is closer to the explosion than the enemy is, but she takes no damage, while this enemy dies. My assumption here is that there's some kind of perk or unlock that'll make Kay immune to any and all explosion damage, but we haven't seen anything like that, so I'm just making an assumption. In the absence of any kind of perk like that, this is really weird. And here, when Kay takes a hit that chunks almost half her health, there's literally no animation in reaction. The only indication that she's been hit is an audio cue and her health goes down. My hope is that this isn't intentional and this is an old build and these problems will be resolved prior to launch, because not having an animation for the main character getting hit is pretty yikes. Yet while these things do strike me as problems, I don't think they're as serious as some others clearly seem to, and I think it might come down to what you expected this game to be and what you want out of it. I tend to look at Ubisoft titles the same way I look at popcorn movies. If it entertains me long enough to feel like I've gotten my money's worth, I'm not particularly concerned beyond that. That's my expectation going into Outlaws, and the impression that I get from early previews is that it's going to meet these expectations. Here's why. I love MMORPGs. If I could only play one genre for the rest of my life, it would probably be MMOs. I think they offer a level of immersion into a world with player agency that you just can't find in other games, and the level of investment that players have in the game worlds that they occupy is unmatched elsewhere. One of my favorite MMOs as a kid was Star Wars Galaxies. It launched in 2003, back before every MMO was just a WoW clone and a new skin, and it had one of the most creative class systems in any MMO ever made, allowing a crazy number of class combinations and customization of skills on one character that could create some truly epic and broken builds. Sure, it was buggy, it was rushed, none of its systems ever really worked right, but it rose above most of its flaws because, most importantly, it allowed you to realize a Star Wars fantasy in a role-playing environment. If you wanted to be a bounty hunter, you could do that. You wanted to be a dancer or a musician in a cantina, you could do that too. If you wanted to be a Jedi, you kind of ruined the game. But you could also be a smuggler, and especially after the first expansion jumped to lightspeed, added personal starships and full spaceflight, that class fantasy was immaculate. And that's the itch that I feel like Star Wars Outlaws is really aiming to scratch. Han Solo RP in a believable and immersive Star Wars game environment. Sure, Han's been replaced by K-Vess, the Millennium Falcon's been replaced by the Trailblazer, Chewie's been swapped for a commando droid in a trench coat, which, being honest, I don't really hate, and your pet dog, Chorizo. But I get the sense, based on just the video footage that Ubisoft has released and the other massive games that I've played, that Outlaws is something different than what we've gotten from EA during their exclusive reign over the Star Wars IP. Most Star Wars games, even before the era of EA, have tried to be one thing, and stuck very close to what that one thing is. Republic Commando is a squad shooter, nothing else. Squadrons is as close to an old-school space sim as we're ever likely to get again, and it fills that role reasonably well. Battlefront is a casual multiplayer shooter with hero classes that does that reasonably well. Star Wars Jedi are combat-focused games with Dark Souls and Metroid inspirations, and they fill the role of being that thing very well. All these games are very clearly designed to be one thing. Their gameplay is reflective of that and executed competently, with nothing ever being really outstanding, but nothing ever really being that bad either. Outlaws seems like it's designed to be an immersive Star Wars galaxy as a backdrop for your scoundrel fantasy, and its gameplay is there to fill in the gaps. I mean, look at the trivial environmental clutter in this level, how detailed it is, and how authentic it is to the original trilogy's aesthetic. This rendition of the Mos Eisley Cantina looks incredible, super faithful to A New Hope set and lovingly detailed in a way that evokes feelings that other incarnations of this room in other video games simply haven't, despite how iconic they are. So without even knowing very much about the gameplay, and even seeing the problems that it looks like this game has, I'm not gonna lie, I fuck with this game. I look at these environments and I think about how some of these systems can interact, and I'm not even really that concerned with how good the gameplay is, or how good the systems are, because it seems like that's not really the point. The point is to put you in a world that you know, and let you run around and do video game stuff in Star Wars. Not so different from the Avatar game that Massive released earlier this year, which, despite a pretty bog-standard Ubisoft open world loop, I really enjoyed and I thought was beautifully made. This may seem strange since I was sounding the alarm on this game at the beginning of 2023 when supposed insiders were overselling it before we'd seen a frame of gameplay. And not to toot my own horn or anything, but literally everything I said at the time turned out to be correct. Outlaws does not have a seamless universe. These transitions between space and planet or planet and space are very clearly hiding loads. The K-Vest player character is not fully customizable. At best, it looks like we're getting some pre-made cosmetic customizations, skins, and equipment or clothing. The skill system doesn't look like it accommodates builds, instead opting for unlockable upgrades with a Red Dead Redemption style challenge system tied to both quest unlocks and gameplay actions. But do I care about the game not having a seamless universe or a fully customizable character? Not even a bit. Do I even care that some of this gameplay looks like Assassin's Creed Wars? Also, not even a little. I'm not expecting high art or a Game of the Year candidate. Like I said, I look at Ubisoft games as popcorn movies. I just want to be entertained until I feel like I've gotten my money's worth. The Ubisoft outpost clearing gameplay loop might be stale, but I'll take stale over bad. I would hope that Massive have done what they can to spice this gameplay loop up and differentiate it from the other games that Ubisoft puts out. But even if it's exactly the worst possible implementation of Assassin's Creed Wars, I've played that game before, and it's not terrible. It's not like we're conquering these outposts or fully clearing them in the gameplay that's been shown, and in fact the game's reputation system seems to be an active barrier to that sort of gameplay loop. So my assumption is that we'll get certain objectives that take us inside these camps, where being discovered will affect our reputation, but making a clean escape will give us some gameplay advantage without negatively affecting our relationships with the crime syndicates. That in itself is enough of a variation on the normal formula to keep it fresh, in my opinion. And then there are alternate styles of gameplay that we've seen in the IGN footage and other gameplay that's been released that looks almost more like a linear adventure game. In the IGN footage, we see Kay navigating the interior of a dead Sarlacc, and previously we've seen her using similar tools to navigate a crashed ship in other footage. I wasn't really expecting this style of gameplay from Outlaws. These levels look like something I'd expect in the Star Wars Jedi games, but I don't really hate these sorts of levels. I've heard some people pushing back on this as generic and out of place, and I'll definitely give you generic, but did you really want to spend the entirety of your time with this game clearing outposts and climbing watchtowers? I'm fine with some variety in the gameplay, even if that variety isn't really innovative or of incredible quality across the board, or even if it doesn't really fit. For example, I don't need the space game to be outstanding, because if I want an outstanding space game, I'll just play Squadrons. But if the space game can create a diversion for me and break me out of the usual gameplay loop every couple hours when I go to a new planet, it will have done its job. I don't need this adventure-style gameplay to be outstanding, I just need it to be good enough to entertain me and not make me mad. Also, can I just say this? I've heard criticism of this segment in particular on the speeder, literally just traveling from a quest giver NPC to the quest location, and it's actually blowing my mind. Some of you are completely out of your minds to be shitting on this, and I can't think of any explanation other than just needing to find something to complain about. Oh, the environment is empty. It's Tatooine. How populated do you want it to be? There's a crate dragon in the desert, there's rocky cliff walls on either side of you, and there's a quest objective 40 seconds ahead of you by speeder. There are obviously going to be things to do on this planet, they just can't smack you over the head with visual indications of, hey, there's something right here, come check it out, without making Tatooine look like something other than Tatooine. Oh, you're driving in a straight line across an empty world. You know, that description reminds me of another game I've played. Riding a mount in a mostly straight line on the road across a mostly empty world. That game is Red Dead Redemption 2, and go ahead and tell me I'm wrong. I think maybe 80% of my time in Red Dead Redemption 2 was probably just riding my horse from one place to another. I love that game. I think it's one of the best gaming experiences ever crafted. but it took me an hour just to gallop around the map one time to capture this footage. So please, holy shit, let's not act like a big empty map is necessarily a bad thing. I would argue it improves Red Dead's atmosphere immensely. Find something in the Outlaws gameplay that's worthwhile to criticize. You can definitely find things to shit on, but this ain't it. I mean, this Mon Cala female has tits. Why does the fish lady have tits? My concerns based on what I'm seeing have really nothing to do with the visuals and everything to do with AI and attention to detail. I'm concerned that the enemies seem stupid and might give up the search for you too soon when you're very obviously there, and as a result it might break the stealth infiltration gameplay that I think is generally the high point of games like this. I'm worried that enemies don't seem to be put into an aggressive state by explosions that are right next to them when it's obvious where the shot came from. I'm worried that there might be more missing details that would hurt the authentic feel of the world based on missing details like a damage taken animation for K. But until we see more, or the game releases, it's hard to know how much of this is a legitimately incomplete game, and how much might just be an incomplete build ahead of a good release, which is what everyone should be hoping for. Despite the red flags we're seeing in the gameplay, I'm trying to remain optimistic, and I maintain that the pricing model for this game is far more egregious than anything in the gameplay. I would also just point out that 1 month of an $18 a month subscription to Ubisoft Plus is significantly cheaper than even the $70 for the base game, let alone the $130 for the Ultimate Edition, and I encourage everyone to make their financial decisions accordingly, knowing that post-launch content is likely to be drip-fed at an appropriately slow cadence to keep you subscribed as long as possible. Despite my problems with how this game's being monetized and the red flags I'm seeing in the gameplay previews, I want to go into this with a positive attitude, and I just hope the game's fun and gives a good first experience and hopefully some replay value. And even if this game doesn't meet my expectations, with Star Wars Bounty Hunter re-releasing before Outlaws even hits shelves, Star Wars fans like me are going to be eating good in the video game space for the next couple months. Thanks so much for watching, please like the video if you like it, and subscribe for future content. Goodbye, my friends, and may the Force be with you.